Hi everyone, I'm Peter Scove. You're watching Music is a Journey. You know, not long ago, Propfe over at Propfe, Musically Obsessed, did a video about 5 of his favorite instrumentals. And MGK Boston jumped on that and also did a video of 5 of his favorite instrumentals. And then he said, I don't know if it's a thread or not, but let's turn it into one. I hope lots of people will jump on it. Soon after that, Steve at All the World's a Stage also made a video about his 5 favorite instrumentals, or 5 of his favorite instrumentals. And that got me thinking, okay, I think I'm going to do this too. And funny thing is, I just turned on my computer not that long ago and hopped over to YouTube for a quick peek, and I see that Brian at Embryonic Robot has also just done a video on 5 instrumentals. Now, an interesting comment from MGK Boston was that he said a lot of people don't like instrumentals. They think they're filler and they would prefer to have their vocals. And I think it was Steve at All the World's a Stage who also said he's not all that keen on instrumentals. However, I actually quite like them. And as a matter of fact, a few years back, or maybe several years by now, I made a playlist of a bunch of my favorite instrumentals that I wanted to burn onto a CD to make a mix CD to play in the car. Unfortunately, around that time, my car stereo decided it didn't want to accept CDs anymore, and if I tried to shove a CD into it, it just spat it back out again. I inquired about the cost of having it repaired, and it seemed it was quite a high price. And so instead, a friend of mine said, why don't you just get a Bluetooth speaker? And I did that. It's not the same sound quality as actually playing a CD off the car speakers, but it's better than just playing it off the phone in the car. Well, anyway, I do like my instrumentals, and I thought about this as a thread and thought, gosh, how can I pick just 5? Seriously. I started thinking about what ones could I think of. I remember some of them that were on my list. I started thinking of acoustic guitar instrumentals, some of my favorites there. I started thinking of Pink Floyd and Metallica and Dream Theater and the Flower Kings, and I just became inundated with ideas. So what I decided to do was just calm the frig down. And I thought of 5. And I thought of 7. But I'm going back to 5. So now I'm going to get straight to it here, because I know everybody on the internet would like me to cut to the chase rather than do a 5-minute intro to every video. So here we go. My first pick is the extended live version of the Ginger Baker drum solo. Yeah, right. That was a little joke. Drum solo. Yeah. I think to quote Ben Rankin's, who loves a drum solo? I don't. Right. No. Getting onto it seriously though. So this is Wobbler. They're a Norwegian prog band. This is from their second album called Afterglow, and there is a track on here called In Taberna, which is 13 minutes and 10 seconds long. This showcases what Wobbler are all about. Man, and they are about a lot. They are very much about classic prog, and it's everything from Genesis to ELP to King Crimson to, I don't know, who didn't I mention yet? Yes, I don't know, it's just loads and loads of stuff. So we have got lots of keyboard synthesizer solos and mellotron. We've got guitar solos. We've got flute in here. I think there's even crumhorn in here. Hello, Griffin. There's stuff that sounds like classic 70s rock. There's stuff that sounds like medieval music, I think, with more traditional sounding instruments. One of my favorite parts in here, though, is when the Moog, is it a Moog or is it a Moog? I think it's a Moog, but some people say Moog. Anyway, or Moog. That one, M-O-O-G, synthesizer, is doing this really cool Moog. I'm going to call it a Moog, okay? Otherwise I'm going to confuse myself. The synthesizer is doing this cool, really, that synthesizer sound rhythm, and then this electric guitar comes in like dun 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 down dun 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 down, and it just has this wonderful 70s feel to it. And then it goes on to this rolling thing and comes to a climax, and then boom, once again the synthesizer's doing its thing and the guitar is coming back in, and then it changes up again. There's just so much action going on in this, but that's my first pick, is in, what did I call it? I always forget what it's called. Is it Taberna? In Taberna. In Taberna from Wobbler's Afterglow album. This goes back to, I think it was around 2000. No, there's no date on the back. I think it's around 2005 or 2007. 2005 was the debut. This is 2007 then. Okay, next up. So back around 2006, 2007, I was really into Deep Purple for the second time in my life. And after filling up the Deep Purple studio album catalog, I started finding what each member of Deep Purple, anyone who had ever been in Deep Purple, what they had done outside of the band. And so here is Colosseum 2. I forget the drummer's name now, but the drummer from the original Colosseum started up a second band, and we have Gary Moore on guitars and Don Airey on keyboards. And the opening track is called Dark Side of the Moog, which is why I think it's called a Moog, because Dark Side of the Moon, Dark Side of the Moog, it wouldn't make sense to say Dark Side of the Mog, would it? But anyway, I don't know. Dark Side of the Moog, and what a fantastic solo. The drummer is totally nuts on here. Gary Moore is just, blazing all over the fretboard. And the first half is mostly for Gary Moore soloing. And then the second half, we get the Dark Side of the Moog part with all the interesting synthesizer solos done by Don Airey. So I've always really liked that. And when I started making mixed CDs of my favorite Deep Purple and Deep Purple family songs, I opened it with that one. That was my lead in to that collection there. So that's Colosseum 2. And I guess I could say also, Colosseum's first album, I think 5 of the 6 tracks had vocals, and maybe there was one that was just an instrumental, but they did 2 more albums after this without a vocalist, just the 4 musicians playing. I think, was it Dave Murray that was on bass? I forget. Okay, also going back to those times, Steve Morse and his High Tension Wires album. This was his first album that he released after taking a couple of years off music. He got his pilot's license and he started flying for a bit. There's a picture of him with short hair on the back. And this is the first album he did after getting back into playing music again. And the opening, it's all instrumental by the way, but the opening track, Ghost Wind, was an instant favorite of mine. It's such a beautiful guitar piece, and it actually reminds me of a lot of the music I used to hear on the Windham Hill Records label. A girl I was dating had a double CD of a collection of different artists from the Windham Hill label, and I just remember there was a certain feeling, kind of general atmosphere. Even though each of the tracks were different, there was this general feeling to what kind of music that label had, and this opening track feels like that, and I really loved it. And interestingly, Steve Morse appeared on Rick Beato's channel maybe a few months back, and his appearance on the channel opened up with him playing exactly Ghost Wind. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah, so beautiful track. Really love that one. Now, and one instrumental that has remained a favorite of mine for very, very long time, the Iron Butterfly theme from Iron Butterfly's debut album Heavy, released in January of '68. Now I actually do have a vinyl copy of this, because in the late 80s, when I was really getting into 60s music, most of it was not available on cassette. Almost nothing was available on cassette, and I hadn't started buying CDs yet, so I had to track down a lot of this old stuff on records. And I have in that walk-in closet a box with some of my LPs that I bought at that time, but not all of them. And I don't ever remember getting rid of any LPs. I never remember taking a bunch to the store and trying to sell them off. But there are definitely some that I know I had that are not there, so maybe they're somewhere else. Anyway, Iron Butterfly theme, I just love that. I love the 60s heavy stuff. And I really love how by 67, 68, it's just started getting heavier. We're still in that psychedelic guitar sound though. For me, the changeover came, well, I guess you could say with Cream's Fresh Cream album. That was the first, for me, heavy guitar sound that wasn't that typical buzzing psychedelic fuzz tone that was very common over in the States. But Led Zeppelin's debut album also has a more aggressive guitar distortion sound to it that is less not like the psychedelic sound that we hear on Jefferson Airplane and a lot of other American bands in particular. But yeah, anyway, I really love the Iron Butterfly track. It is the heaviest track on the album. It's got some really crashing fuzz tone guitar chords. It's got pick slides. It has Doug Ingalls, like haunted house organ sound on there. I just love that track. A couple of years back, I was listening to it as I came home at night. It was in my ears, and before I went in the house, I just stopped outside and listened to it, and it was one of those moments where the music just really gets into you, and you're just like, oh man, this is just so freaking awesome. So Iron Butterfly theme is one of my favorites. And in fact, it wasn't even originally included on the list. I was going to put a Dream Theater instrumental instead, but then I went into the shower last night and I was like, oh my gosh, Iron Butterfly theme. No, it has to be on there. And then this is a French-Canadian band called Slosh. They did 2 prog albums of, I think it's not exactly totally instrumental because there are some vocals, but it's not singing a song. It's vocals being used as an instrument. So they did 2 albums in the mid-70s. This was their debut. It means... I think it means I'm an I or something like that. I'm afraid my French pronunciation is like mediocre at best, and this is not one of those at best times. So anyway, it is the 4th track, Algebrique. It is only 6 minutes and 31 seconds. Wow, I thought it was longer because so much happens in that song. They just introduce a theme, go with it. Introduce another theme, go with it. Introduce another theme, and it just keeps changing. I don't remember how many times. But there are some weird parts. There's one weird part where the band is going shtu-doop, ding, shtu-doop, ding, like this along with the music, and it sounds pretty, okay guys. But there are some other parts that are really, really cool, and my favorite part is one where the saxophone, guitars, bass, everything, they're going like dun-dun, dun-dun, and in between the drums are going, and the drum sound is just so fantastic. I always feel like my head is just inside the drums and the sticks are just going over. It is so fantastic. I love that. And then after that, it gets this kind of really heavy thing with organ and guitars, and kind of reminds me of what the band Seven and Pale are doing these days. I wonder if they didn't take inspiration from this. So anyway, from Slosh's debut album, this is Algebrique. I really love that. Had to mention it. Now, that was also a latecomer, one of those ones I thought of while I was in the shower. Oh my gosh, Slosh, I gotta put them on. So Dream Theater got bumped off for Iron Butterfly, and Focus got bumped off for Slosh. But I really want to mention, this is number 6. This is an honorable mention. This is Focus's Hocus Pocus, which whether you listen to it on this album or you hear the version that they did on that television program, there's videos on YouTube, the versions are slightly different, but both are equally fantastic. Just incredible. I'm not like a huge fan of Focus, but that track is one that just gets me pumped every time I hear it. So Focus, Hocus Pocus. Okay. Now, as I was thinking about this, that's it. I've done my 5. I've given the honorable mentions. So if you've had enough of me, you're welcome to move along now. But I did want to mention, I know Brian actually said this. He said he didn't want to include bands that did a lot of instrumental albums, which is fair, right? I mean, you can pick, for example, Steve Morse, actually. Okay, so I did. I have a few Steve Morse albums, which are all instrumental. But that one in particular I had to mention. No, I was actually thinking I had not listened to this album for ages. This is David Lance, Cristofori's Dream. Interestingly, this is the original cover photo, and when I saw this, I thought, that looks really kind of familiar. And then I checked the credits and saw the photographer is Freeman Patterson, who is a Canadian photographer from New Brunswick. I don't know if he's still alive or not now, but he was my favorite photographer there. One of the people who really inspired me to shoot details of landscapes of the earth, particularly using rocks and water. And so, yeah, I just recognized that's his photo style, and indeed it was. No, David Lance, this one here, and then also David Lance with Paul Spear. They did a whole series of albums together, and I used to listen to these to pick out tracks to use for my multimedia presentations when I used to do presentations with nature photographs and then have music going alongside and have the slides changing to the music. So I actually have not listened to these in since the mid 90s, I guess, but I kept them because I always thought there were some really beautiful instrumentals on here. Now, a funny thing is, I heard about this band called Stone Garden, which was a heavy psychedelic band out of Idaho in the late 60s, and I bought their album. And when I was looking through the credits inside, I saw that it said guitars Paul Speer, and I thought, Paul Speer, the guy playing this really heavy, fuzzy guitar, is the guy who's on these albums? Are you kidding me? And sure enough, it is. Paul Speer later on became a new age musician and recorded, several albums with David Lance. And the interesting thing is then I tracked him down. I found him on Facebook and got in touch with him because I did a video where I introduced Paul Speer and talked about Stone Garden and these CDs as well as others. And I'm still actually connected with Paul on Facebook. So I've picked up some of his more recent works, which are also instrumentals. One thing, he actually did 2 albums with the drummer of Queensryche, Scott Rockenfeld, back in the late 90s, and I have one of those as well. So, that was just an interesting thing. If I haven't done it already, I'll put the link into that video, so you can actually hear samples of some of the music from different albums, but not these, because Paul doesn't have permission to give me, he doesn't have the copyright ownership of these ones. Okay, so that one, and then one other one that I thought about, this is actually a Chinese group called, okay, I'm not going to read it in Chinese because I don't know how exactly, but and never mind the Japanese. I'll just tell you what it is. It's the 12 Girls Band, okay? It's these 12 Chinese ladies here who play traditional Chinese instruments, stringed instruments and woodwind instruments, and I really love the sound. So I bought their first 3 albums. And what they do is they play, in some cases, original arrangements. Some of them are traditional arrangements, and some of them are modern music arrangements like Take 5, or they did Coldplay's Clocks, or there was one Japanese pop group called SMAP. They had this one big hit song, which they did as well. So it's all instrumental music. What I love about it is I love the sound of those instruments. It's all acoustic, right? So you have the erhu, the upright 2-string violin thing. You have the, in Japanese it's called a koto. I don't know what it's called in Chinese, but it's like that big board with the strings on that you pluck and there's another one, I think it's called a pipette or something like that. It looks like a pear-shaped instrument with several strings on it and different kinds of flutes and so on. I love the sound of those instruments. What I don't like is that there's still some modern drumming sound. There's some modern keyboard sounds or modern synthesizer, I don't know, some modern things which sometimes is okay as a support for the music, but sometimes I find it's a little too strong. But anyway, I'd say each of these albums, there are 3 or 4 tracks I really, really like. And again, I haven't listened to these for about 20 years. So I was listening to them on YouTube last night, and just, that familiarity, hearing something that you really loved and listened to a lot and haven't heard for a long time, it was such a welcome, wonderful thing to hear it again. So I think I should make a playlist of my favorite tracks of these and listen to them one more time. Okay, so you had it. My 5 picks. Toad was a joke. And my honorable mention and some others. And that concludes my video of 5 favorite instrumentals. But honestly, I could have made a list of 50 of them if I really dug my fingers into it. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. See you again next time. Bye.